Welcome to my humble abode. I'm Yoki the Tailspinner, and this is Tales Over Coffee. Return now to Mariupol, the first Ukraine war stories. Where Oleksii, wife Liliyana, have just found their town invaded by Russians. Their neighbours have asked him to look after a bottle of booze, because they know he won't drink it, until they can celebrate victory. He wasn't wrong there. I barely drank, and we never kept any alcohol at home. So when I came to the basement to stash the bottle, Lilia had some questions. It's a gift from David Merizian. He said we'll open it when it's time to celebrate our victory, I said. I didn't tell her about the Maria. Big cargo plane, which has been destroyed. Lily gave me a sideways look, but soon realised I was being honest. He smiled. That's a wonderful idea. Give him my thanks. The day drew to a close, and me and David were parting ways just before the curfew. Shots were already ringing out somewhere far. The night, like the one before it, was going to get loud. Suddenly we hear the voices of approaching vehicles. Hear the sound of approaching vehicles. What do you know? Our armed forces have finally arrived, David asked, and looked out onto the road. Then his face dropped. As the armoured vehicles rolled down the road, we could see the bright white Z's painted on them. No change in parameters. It has been a week since the war begun. Just a week, an entire week. Time seemed to have slowed down, and every new day that came seemed longer than before. Deep inside, my fear was growing. Fear for myself, my family, my home, my country. Fear for the future. We heard bombs exploding outside, and wondered if the next one would hit us, and if we'd survive it. The constant wait for death left us with neither energy nor willingness to do anything. All we did was keep checking the news. I don't know what we want to see there. There's good news when in short supply, but any new information served to distract us from the horrors around us. That's what we were doing, sitting in our basement, when the phone rang. Me and Lily flinched from the sound. The happy melody our daughter picked for the ringtone sounded terribly out of place, sacrilegious even. Could only imagine it would. It was David, our neighbour. Oleksii, hide your phone. The Ruskies are going around town taking them away. He hung up and I quickly hid the phone under the floorboards. David's timing was impeccable. Upstairs in our house, we heard a loud crash and heavy footsteps. The Russians broke into our home. We turned off the light, leaving me and Lily in total darkness, and listened. Lyosha, what do we do? Lily whispered. I heard growing panic in her voice. In the dark, I found a hand and squeezed it. Let's be quiet, maybe they'll leave us alone. We weren't so lucky. In a few moments, someone knocked down the basement door. It was a heavy sound. They must have been knocking with the rifle's butt. Open up, quick, or we're breaking the door. I didn't want to let the Russians in, but I didn't want to antagonize armed men either. We had to turn on the lights and open the door. 3 Russian soldiers descended into the basement. They were armed. Just turn this down a little bit. They were armed and looked ready to use their weapons at the drop of a hat. Lily backed away from them, and so did I, using a wall for support. One of the soldiers noticed my limp. I didn't want to let the Russians in. Oh, sorry. Thought I'd hit next. What's wrong with your leg, old man? Demanded the corporal. He must have thought it was a combat wound. Hurt to step on it, an old injury. Spent half my life with a cane. He nodded and looked around our basement. We're searching the houses, looking for Nazis and saboteurs. Do you know any Nazis in this city? Wow. Yeah, that was one of the lies told, wasn't it? I'm not going to say that because it would antagonize them. I'm not going to send them to someone else's. You know what? We will antagonize them. Screw it. Tell them they're being lied to. The Russian's words are terrifying and hysterical at the same time. Nazis here? Were they really so brainwashed by their television? Come on, don't believe everything you're told. There are no Nazis in Ukraine. They tell you this, so you feel like you're fighting up for the good side. I cut myself off when I saw the Russian commander's eyes. In hindsight, now that they were in Ukraine with weapons and tanks, it was too late to try and talk some sense into them. You talk too much. It's a bit suspicious if you ask me. He pointed his gun at me and gave his soldiers an order. Take this one with us. Looks like we found a Nazi collaborator. Shit. Alright, that was a stupid move on my part. I went pale in the face. Lydia rushed towards the soldiers, pleading for them to leave me alone, but they shoved her away. One of the Russians pointed his gun at my head, and the other grabbed me by the shoulders and dragged me upstairs. He walked fast, and I had to try and keep up regardless of pain. But on the stairs, my bum leg failed me and I collapsed. Please, leave him alone. Can't you see he can barely walk? The soldiers stopped, looking to their commander for further orders. He thought about it for a moment, then waved his hand. Fine, leave him be. With a leg like that, if he's dangerous, I'm the Queen of fucking England. He looked at us. You two stay inside while we work. Show your face outside, and you're getting shot. When they left, Lila rushed to me. I'd barely gotten up when she gave me a tight hug. Lyosha, what's gotten into you? What if they did take you with them? I know you're brave, but please don't be a fool. We were still fighting, but only on the outskirts. Lily had never gotten used to it, but I did. Still fighting was something I kept telling myself, as I saw Russians rummage through the houses on our street. A unit of Chechens, Kirovites, as they are called, even dropped by our wreck of a house. There wasn't much to steal, but they stole it anyway. Me and Lily had enough sense not to argue, and so they just took what they wanted and left. The Mrizoyans' turn hadn't come yet. They knew they would not be so lucky. That's why I couldn't refuse David when he asked that his daughter stay with us a few days. Me and Lilia were just a tired old couple, and with my leg I wasn't much of a threat. The Russians were done with us. Thank you so much, Oleksii. Those people are monsters, David shared as Lily helped Milena make her way into our basement. Have you heard the word around town? God, imagine having to shield your own children like that by giving them to someone else. It's happened in many wars, in many places, of course, but... Of course I had. The Russians took whatever they wanted. They ate anything that could be eaten, drank anything that could be drunk, and took everything they could resell back home. I wasn't born yesterday. I expected as much. It was war, and I could accept it. But what they did to women, I refuse to accept. Sadly, that's another thing that's been done by soldiers of all nations to one extent or another. We know what he's talking about. I'm not going to specify it. But it's disgusting. It is a war crime. Are you sure you don't want to join us, Villa? We'll make room, I offered. He shook his head. No, Fedorovich. You just keep Milena hidden for a few days, okay? Me and Ola will manage somehow. We'll keep real quiet. He put his fingers to his lips and smiled. I smiled back at him, and as he walked out onto the streets, I waved him goodbye. There was a pop, like a firecracker going off in the distance. David fell to the ground. He screamed. Oh, shit. What I did next I could never be proud of. I threw myself towards the basement entrance and slammed the door shut. I understand not being proud, but what else can you do? Downstairs, Lily yelped at the loud bang. My chest began to hurt and I clutched it with one hand. A second distant pop. The screaming stopped. Shit. I think I waited for hours. Liliyana was downstairs, covering her mouth and looking in mute horror, looking with David's eyes. I think I waited for hours. When I finally peeked through the door, slow and careful, making no sound. There was David, all right, and two Russians, one standing over David and another rifling through his pockets. What did you do that for? The one standing one asked. He sounded calm, bored even. He was a Nazi, can't you tell? I know them when I see them. The other shrugged in the dark. He was not being serious. I could hear him grin. He laughed. Then they both lit themselves a cigarette. I closed the basement door and kept it closed through the night. Liliyana cried for hours. Lily held her hand and did her best not to cry too. But in the morning, she too joined in when she heard all us wailing outside. In the morning, there was fighting on the outskirts again, but closer to us. Sometimes, bullets whizzed through the air right above our fence. When I opened the door to the basement, Ola crawled towards us on all fours. Something had to be done about David. Can you do? Show him respect. Get a shovel. I could not leave my friend like that, so I got a shovel and crawled towards David. I dug a grave for him. I had to stop at least 24 times. The air would get too hot, the shots too loud, and the ground would shake so hard, it knocked us all off our feet. In the end, it was barely a grave. David's broad Armenian shoulders barely fit in it. It seems like the earth itself refused to believe he was dead. It had to survive. Twice. And while it was little relief for the girls, we did David good. Dogs weren't going to get him. Oleksii's mood is now 0. Ola and Liliyana only 1. Oleksii loses hope. This event caused by a previous action. It took my hope a while to erode, but when it did, there was no going back. At first they promised that the war would last 3 days, then a week, then till the next weekend. Then the Russians took Hostomel. We're already shelling Kiev. Like David predicted, it's all going to be over soon. But not in the way we expected. I just knew it would end with Zelensky dead. Population put through filtration camps. And there, nobody would care that I am a hero of a socialist labour. Oleksii Borisov could not go on. The Borisov family died with the city. The story has ended. You may wish to replay it to see a different outcome. Honestly, there's a part of me that wants to replay it to get a better outcome. I usually say a good outcome. There is no good outcome, bad outcome, as people usually think. It's not whether everyone survives. It's whether you played it according to how the narrative goes and the characters as you develop them. Here, I have a strong urge to replay, try and save Oleksii, the others. This is real life. I mean, this is a story, yes, based on what's happening. It's shocking. I'm not going to replay it. Because to me, trying to get a pretty ending in a fucking game, just because it'd feel nice to me, would damn well shame those who are dying in Ukraine. I'll honor his sacrifice, his loss, and the loss of the real people who've died, who are dying, who are serving, who are trying to drive back the invaders. Next time, join me. We'll take on Buka. He's Buka, my butcher. Forgive me, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Then Mariupol. But for now, have a blessed day. Be safe. And honor those who aren't. Very well. Slava Ukraini.